The day a loved one dies can be the most difficult day of someone's life. In addition to dealing with someone's grief, there are many decisions that must be made within a few days. There are 87 decisions that must be made within 72 hours of someone's death. Order a death certificate, pensions, benefits, personal identification, notify the Canada Revenue Agency, close personal accounts, make a life insurance claim. How can you ease this burden for your loved one? By pre-planning. These decisions can all be put into three groups: funeral, cemetery, memorialization and estate settlement documents. Let's start with pre-planning the funeral. When you visit a funeral home, you will be asked to make several decisions such as what type of service would you like to have? Over how many days would you like visitation? What type of casket would you like? What type of urn would you like? What type of flowers? The funeral director or licensed funeral pre-planner will complete a document containing itemized products and services. When they finish, they will present you with the total cost of the funeral. They will then present the option of paying for the funeral. They will likely explain that paying for the funeral today will form an agreement or a contract between you and the funeral home, and the benefit is that the funeral will be planned and the costs of the funeral will never go up. The only exception to the costs of the funeral never going up are the costs of the disbursements. Disbursements are not guaranteed by the funeral home. Disbursements could include things such as clergy, newspaper obituaries, cremation/retort fees, coroner's fees, and the registration of the death. The funeral director or licensed funeral pre-planner might say something like the costs of a funeral doubles every 10 years, so it's always best to have a contract and lock in the prices. A traditional funeral today that costs $7,347.75 would have cost approximately $6,250 if you paid for it in 2008, and $4,835.11 if you had paid for it in 1998. Just slightly higher than the average rate of inflation, fades out slowly, meaning that funerals have averaged 2.6% inflation during the past 20 years. This is important to know if you are considering paying the balance of your funerals today, because if the funerals cost $8,500 and your money is earning 5% and you predict that it will be 15 years until the funeral occurs, then prepaying the funeral today could cost you approximately $5,337.40. If you are not concerned about the interest, then paying the balance at the time of pre-planning is the best option. What if you do not have the money to pay on the day you pre-planned? Then if you reside in Ontario, the funeral home will present two options. The first option is a trust fund, where you will pay the balance of the funeral over a set period of time with an additional interest rate. This additional interest rate is used to offset the rising cost of your funeral, so that the funeral home can guarantee the price of the funeral. Interest rates for these trust funds vary, but often the rate is higher than that of a typical home equity line of credit. If you die while making these payments, your family still has to pay the remaining balance. For this reason, most people that choose to pay over time use the other option, the funeral home presence. A group annuity life insurance policy. A group annuity life insurance policy is different from an individual life insurance policy you would purchase from a life insurance agent for the fact the cost of the policy is based on three factors: the age of the person, the amount of the benefit, and the period of time payments would be made over. Someone's health would determine if the benefit would pay out right away or after a waiting period such as the first 2 or 3 years of the policy. If the person died during that time, the family would have to pay the remaining balance minus some interest. Let's look at an example of a group annuity life insurance policy. In Canada, one of the largest providers of funeral expense insurance is Assurant Life of Canada. The majority of the funeral homes in Ontario use Assurant Life of Canada for their group annuity life insurance. If a 70-year-old man, we'll call him Jerry, wants to prepay his funeral and he requests to have the lowest monthly cost he could have, with the group annuity life insurance option, he could pay the policy over 15 years. If his funeral costs $11,380, his payments over 15 years would be $170.70/month until he turns 85, then he could stop paying and the funeral would be paid for. The cost would never increase. What if Jerry was with his wife and they both wanted to prepay? If we assume she is the same age, they could be faced with a monthly bill of $341.40 for the next 15 years. That's very expensive and unaffordable to many people. They haven't even made arrangements at the cemetery yet. Let's look at an example of a policy for Jerry for his funeral offered by Final Expense Solutions. The advisor would ask this man some health questions. No medical would be necessary. If the man was a non-smoker, his rate would be lower. If he hadn't had a stroke, cancer or heart attack within a few years, his rate would be lower. If this man was in reasonably good health, with no serious health issues, the Final Expense Solutions advisor would present him with a monthly payment of around $60 for the amount of the funeral in today's cost. But remember, the funeral professional warned that the costs of the funeral would rise. So we calculate the average amount of inflation expected until someone turns 85 and add it to the policy. Jerry's policy would now be around $80/month, and if he died in year 1, he would have his funeral paid for and the extra benefit provided for the inflation. The example for Jerry compares the exact same funeral cost between the plan the funeral home offers and the plan Final Expense Solutions offers. The funeral itself, however, might cost less with Final Expense Solutions. The funeral professional asked Jerry if he was still active and traveled occasionally. Jerry said yes, and a part of the cost of his funeral is a $595 travel insurance benefit that most funeral homes in Ontario offer. The insurance benefit is triggered when someone dies out of town or out of country. Most of the insurance policies Final Expense Solutions offers have a built-in benefit that pays out in event that someone dies out of country. Therefore, Jerry would likely remove this cost from his funeral. In addition, the funeral home charged him $320 for estate settlement paperwork. Funeral homes offer a package of paperwork for after the funeral has occurred, often called estate or estate settlement documents. These documents contain forms for such things as applying for benefits, life insurance claims, Revenue Canada notifications, Canada Pension Plan death benefit claim. Final Expense Solutions provides these documents at no charge upon any consultation, regardless if any planning is completed or not. That is another fee that can reduce the cost of the funeral. Now Jerry's monthly cost of his funeral with Final Expense Solutions is less than half of what the funeral home was going to charge. In addition to the monthly cost being significantly lower, most of the plan's final expense solutions uses have additional benefits. For example, if someone needs caring for with daily activities such as nursing care, they can access some or all of the benefit that would be used for the funeral. If this tragedy strikes, money to survive will become very important. If someone needs emergency funds after having the plan in place for a few years, there are cash values that can be accessed without canceling the plan. If someone died in an accident, the benefit would be the value of the funeral X2, not to forget that the funeral has an added value for inflation that would pay out on top of the funeral benefit in a death occurred in the first few years of having the plan. Having a contract that locks in part of the cost of the funeral expenses suddenly looks very expensive.